president spoke about this directly yesterday. His patience is running out. He wants to see as much of the Save America passed as possible by the August recess. He knows that's what the American people want to see passed. And I would just add, the American people elected overwhelmingly Republicans to lead not just this White House, but also the House and the Senate. The House did its job. The Senate needs to do its job, too.
The White House going public with its criticism of Senate Majority Leader John Thune over President Trump's push to pass the Save America Act, despite lacking the GOP votes needed to do so. Thune is pushing back, saying Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt or, quote, somebody else ought to get on the phone and get the votes. This after Leavitt said the president's patience was wearing thin. Thune went on to say that instead of pointing the finger at Republicans, the White House might think about going after the people who are stopping it on the floor, which is the Democrats. That's not entirely true, Ali Vitale, because there's certainly, look, Thune has made clear he's not going to do away with the filibuster for this. You, as you covering the Hill each and every day, know that there are some misgivings with this bill. Certainly Democrats are vehemently opposed because of all the stuff that's stuffed in there. So talk to us, though. It's rare, Thune was never been an ultra-Trump loyalist, but he's navigated that relationship, I'd say, reasonably well until now. But the tensions are bursting into public domain.
And Thune maintains, as he did with me yesterday when I ran into him on Capitol Hill, that Republicans are marching toward the same goals broadly, whether it's on an eventual Russian sanction package or the budget resolution or just funding the government. Like, all of these different plates are spinning in the air right now. And the dynamics are just always different between the way the House is able to do things with their slim majority and the way that the Senate is able to do things with their slim majority, and the fact that you're going to have to get to 60 votes to overcome a filibuster. What I see in the way that, in pretty rare fashion, Karoline Leavitt is saying the president's patience is wearing thin with the top Republican in the Senate is that John Thune's patience kind of seems to be wearing thin with this, because he is a very even keel guy. And the way that you're seeing him say they should pick up the phone and call and get the votes is very out of character for someone like Thune, who is pretty no drama around the Senate. The other thing that he has at his backing is twofold, in my estimation. The first is that he's well-liked by his colleagues. He is really blocking and tackling for them, the small minority of them that don't want to vote for the SAVE Act, for example. He's well-liked. The other piece of this, too, is that he is not going to be the person who goes against the decades and decades of precedent in the institution and gets rid of the filibuster, despite the fact that the president wants it now. Republicans 10 years down the line, if the filibuster is gone because of a Republican and they find themselves in the minority, they're going to be cursing the day that the filibuster was gotten rid of. And so those are the stakes that Thune is keenly aware of. He just has to muddle through this temporary period, and we'll see how temporary it is, either for the president's ire or for Thune's role as the leader of this conference, which I have to underscore is not in jeopardy right now. But we know that the president's ire can run hot for a while. Now, despite all of the focus here on the president's intra-party spats, and again, they very much exist, the prevailing attitude among Republicans on Capitol Hill is one of absolute loyalty to Trump. And that's despite the Iran war, high gas prices, tariffs, and dozens of other potential policy disagreements. My MS Now Capitol Hill colleague Jack Fitzpatrick asked 26 Republican lawmakers over the last few weeks whether they disagreed with anything Trump has done so far this term. And most couldn't or wouldn't name a single complaint.
Has the president done anything so far this term that you disagree with?
No.
No,
the guy's doing great.
Greenland.
I suggest we probably try to give him a third term.
Tariffs?
Actually, really should be a fourth.
Has the president done anything so far this term that you just definitely disagree with?
No, I think he's done a great job.
No, I can't disagree with him on that. I really can't.
As one of the most conservative members of Congress, I agree with the president 99.9% of the time.
I just can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I'm sure there is.
Obviously, I support his overall agenda, but there are individual things, but I'm not going to sit and enumerate it.
Not even the
Pope. The Pope, I think, learned his lesson. The Pope needs to keep his nose in the religion, right, and tend to his flock.
So far this term, has President Trump done anything you disagree with?
We're not going to speculate on that. No comment.
Has the president done anything so far this term that you disagree with?
Great to see you guys. I'm going to go vote a little late.
Nothing?
There are things that I have some disagreement. I mean, you know, good Lord, nobody's going to agree 100%.
What disagreements have you had this term so far?
Oh, there have been a few things about, you know, when we have some maybe pricing issues or possibly some trade issues one way or the other. Nothing I think that I would raise a kerfluffle about.
Although we don't agree with everything he says or tweets, we agree on his goals and his purpose and his policies are working.
I'm a Republican. I like to focus on the areas of agreement.
The big thing that I disagree with, he pardoned Rod Blagojevich. If boots go on the ground in Iran, I disagree with that.
You mentioned boots on the ground as a limitation. Do you want an AUMF to outline what they can and can't do and what their authorities are?
Listen, I trust President Trump. I trust Secretary Hegseth.
So far this term, is there anything the president has done that you just disagree with?
I don't think so.
No? Not small things or anything on tariffs?
Maybe just vetoing my bill, but don't worry, I'm still fine.
No, he hasn't. He's been overcoming organizations like MS Now, finding something wrong with everything he does.
Who are just doing the reporting by talking to Republicans on Capitol Hill, who, Lemire, increasingly between the private and public, there is that dissonance that we always talk about. Certainly, Jack's reporting shows the public posture of not wanting to get crosswise with this administration. That is not always what we hear privately.
No, certainly not. But this shows, again, John Hammond, just the utter fear that so many of these Republicans live under. Fear of President Trump, but also fear of their voters, their base. Especially as these districts get redder and redder because of redistricting, you know, it is not a profile in courage among that group. And even, I couldn't help but note, Lauren Boebert there, who did really object to Trump's handling of Epstein,
yes,
but yet couldn't bring herself to say it now.
Yeah, I you know, think about what the news really would have been. This is no criticism of the piece. It really is extraordinary to see all of those interviews Republicans laid out in a row like that. It kind of brings home the degree of homogeneity and unanimity and fear, as you said. Just imagine what if there had been someone who'd been like, actually, I disagree with him on the following thing. That would have been like a huge news item. You know, such and such Republican congressman came out today, and that's why that's part of the deal, right? Which is that all of them have, in a kind of ambient sense, that they do not want to be. They know that their colleagues are being asked this question, and they know that all their colleagues are going to say, "No, I'm with Donald Trump. You know, I'm very loyal to Donald Trump." So everybody's kind of very quickly making the calculation. I do not want to be the one person who gets in a fight with the White House over anything. And that is just an absolutely absurd environment in which to work and an absolutely absurd way by which to govern ourselves.
Just a shameless devotion to everything that President Trump wants.